You want to do a 3 count?
Hello, good morning. Happy Saturday to everybody. I want to thank you. I'm Pastor John Smith here at the Rosemark Church. I want to thank you for tuning in with us for this Seat in the Circle. I am so excited today. I'm here live in the sanctuary of the Rosemark Church. I thought it may be befitting to just tape live from here as far as myself and encourage everybody to call your friends and call your family and let them know that a Seat in the Circle is live. It's the behavioral health ministry of the Rosemark Church, and I am so excited to have our guest here today from the Living Well Network. The Living Well Network at Methodist Labana Healthcare with Alison White and LaNita Conley, two great facilitators that's going to help us understand just some strategies and things, emotions and feelings that we're dealing with. And at the root of all of that is a thrust and a power that is derived from prayer and our relationship with Jesus Christ. And I'm excited to have a Christ-centered counseling session that Rosemark is offering today. You know, a few years ago, several years ago, when I first started pastoring 15 years ago, soon after that, the Lord gave me this idea, this ministry of a seat in the circle. And when we would have that here at Rosemark, of course, the conversation and the intimacy with the conversation and the individual experience of the conversation is what invited individuals to the circle. And when they came to the circle, of course, our counselor and whoever was our guest at that time would begin to deal with those things individually. I saw adults go back in time of their childhood and begin to express the various hurts, the various challenges, the various emotions that in many cases were never dealt with. And so the Lord began to deal with me even more about combining professional strategies with the foundational part of our being, which is built on biblical principles. Make no mistake about it. The biblical principles, the word of God, is what's going to give us true victory. And I want you to know and understand today that by no way am I eliminating or deviating from the awesome power of God and his ability to thrust us into new beginnings and victory and new paths. But on our journey there, we have these obstacles, we have these feelings, we have these emotions that many of us are not strong enough to deal with. Many of us seek a path. Many of us seek various disciplines. They say, when I'm feeling this way, when I have this urge, when I have this desire, when I don't feel my best, I need some strategies. I need some things to kind of help me in my daily disciplines. And that brings us to why we're here today. I've prayed for many people and I've walked families through times of transition. And you know what? I found it to be true, that we all still need some type of accountability in our daily walk with this new journey when a loved one is no longer with us. The Rosemark Church is a family. And today we pause to offer this ministry for not just the Rosemark family, not just the families that were touched by transition, but also those of you who are online that are joining us by Zoom, by Facebook, by YouTube. We'll be replaying this and we want to offer this to you. The Rosemark Church has been through a trying time this year. You know, one of our foundational members, Linda Greer, who I actually grew up knowing here at Rosemark some 48 years ago, was here dedicated to the ministry, worked in every area of ministry. You couldn't have asked for a better supporter and a better advocate for ministry in Jesus Christ, and even myself. The Lord took her on home. It hit us pretty hard. And then after that, one of our church mothers, Mother Edna Alexander, who wasn't here during those foundational years, but the time that she was here made such an impact because of her grace and her loving spirit, her support, and her love for her church. For me and my wife and my family and all of us, she just made such an impact, a woman of wisdom, a woman of class, a strong woman here in the ministry. And then a few weeks ago, our pastor emeritus, Bishop designate Rita Smith, the Lord took him home, my father, who in our 89-year history will go down in the Rosemark history as the most progressive, innovative pastor that we've had, transitioning us into this new era of ministry. There's so much that I can say about his contribution, the areas of growth, the areas of discipline, really thrusting us into what we see now, what we call 21st century ministry. And so here we are this morning. Thank you for joining us. Some of you may be in transit. Some of you may still have on your pajamas, or some of you may have your coffee. Some of you may be at the breakfast table. Some of you may not even have gotten out of the bed yet. We thank you for joining us. We've got a clash of the Titans this morning. We've got some Mississippi graduates, and we've got University of Memphis graduates. So our co-facilitators, we got a clash of the Titans this morning. Alison White brings a host of experience, as well as LaNita Conley, from various areas of consultation. And I ask that you would open up your heart and open up your mind to receive. Get out your note-taking tools, whether it be pen and paper, whether it be your phone or your iPad, or if you're at your computer. Let's take these notes and do some screenshots. Let's jot this information down. It's going to encourage us and help us. Thank you to our video team, Marissa Briggs, Sherilyn Chandler, and all of those who work on our team, Tabitha and Brother Briggs, and all of you that came this morning to help support us. Let's pray. Father, we thank you. Thank you for this time of refreshing. We pray that our hearts will be open, our minds will be attentive to what you're saying to us and how you're speaking to us this morning. We thank you for Alison and LaNita and their gifts to the body of Christ. We pray, oh God, that our spirits will be nurtured and that our minds and our hearts will be encouraged, and that we will receive tools of discipline, but most of all, tools of biblical principles that will help us in our daily journey as we learn to cope with loss and grief. It's in your son, Jesus, that we give thanks. Amen. Well, Alison, LaNita, it's all over to you. We'll pin you, and if you'll give our media folks just about 2 seconds, and we're going to pop up the presentation, and then we'll be in the hands of our co-facilitators, Alison White and LaNita Conley.
Well, it's all they came.
Hey, let me ask you this. Those of you that are on Zoom, if you would please mute your phones. Of course, we have individuals that are monitoring, but you can save us some clicks and save us some time if you mute your phone and mute your computers so that we can hear clearly and no disruptions during our presentation. Thank you, Alison and LaNita. Go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. So thank you, Pastor Smith, for allowing us to join you all today. I do have a question, Pastor Smith, a tech question. Do I need to share my screen, or are your people going to pop up the PowerPoint?
Well, I tell you what, we do have the screen sharing capability.
Okay,
So
I can share my
Sherilyn, I
screen.
think we talked about that. We can give you your own power, and
Okay.
you all can share your own screen.
That works. That works. Let's see. Well, my goodness. That's not it. I'm sorry. Well, that's not good. I knew how to do this. I am so sorry. How do I share that? Let's see. I tell you what, if someone can let's see. Getting it. Okay, can everyone see this? That's coming up.
It's just it says Zoom. That's all I see. It's showing.
Okay, I'm gonna start the slideshow and let's see if we can see this. All right, are we good?
No, we're seeing your Zoom screen.
The what screen?
Zoom.
Okay, let me close this one out then. Hold on. I apologize. I just left the meeting, I think.
No, you're still here.
Okay. So it's on my screen, I'm showing, okay. Everyone, I'm so sorry. Let me try this again. Let's see.
Yes.
Are we good?
Now we're good. Yes.
Yay! Oh, me. I'm too old for all this. So good morning, everyone, again. My name is Alison White, and I'm with Methodist Le Bonheur Healthcare. We are with the Living Well Network program, and we will discuss what our program is at the end of the presentation today.
What, counsel?
So I'm going to, again, introduce myself. I'm Alison. I've been a therapist for about 20 years. I've been with Methodist Le Bonheur for about 6 years, running this program, and just really happy to be here today. And I'm gonna let LaNita take over.
Well, my name is LaNita. I'm a social worker. I've done medical social work, and I've worked with impoverished families. And I'm currently at Methodist right now doing counseling, which I'm loving. It's awesome to be able to help and share support with others.
Great. And just a little side note, in 2017, LaNita was an intern of mine, and then she went on and got her license, and she came back with me. So I'm so excited for that. So today we're going to be talking about coping with grief and loss. So a few things about the presentation today. Let's see. Go down. Well, there we go. So just a reminder, this presentation may be distressing for some, so feel free to mute or turn off your video. Sometimes when we're talking about grief, it can elicit some various emotions. Again, please remember that reactions to grief look different for everybody. We're all unique, and grief is going to look very different in our response to grief. If you need to debrief or have any questions after the presentation, this is my cell phone number. Feel free to call it if you're distressed or you need to talk or debrief about anything, okay? One of my favorite verses when I'm thinking about grief, I know you all have seen this from Psalms, and something that I remind myself quite frequently when I'm going through grief and loss. Okay, so let's start with the basics. What is grief? So grief is a natural reaction to loss. It's the emotional suffering you feel when something or someone you love is taken away. So let's repeat this. It's a natural reaction. So we all have this reaction, and it's a spectrum of reactions, right? So remember, we're all unique within that spectrum of reaction, but it's a natural reaction.
Okay, there are several types of loss. And we're not talking just like a death of a family member or a friend. We're also talking about if you lose a job, if you retire, if you have children that go off to college, if you lose friends for various reasons, if there's a divorce, if you have a financial setback. All of these things are types of loss that can trigger grief. So just be aware that grief is not just associated with the loss of a loved one transitioning. It could also be due to loss of anything in your world. there are several symptoms when you have these losses in your life. The most obvious is anger or confusion or disbelief, but you can also have physical symptoms such as headaches, stomach aches, and then you can also feel just numb. And a lot of people don't understand there's sometimes guilt involved and despair, and those things that a lot of people just really don't want to discuss, anxiety and disbelief and just overall sadness.
And this is not an inclusive list. There could be things on here that you experience and that aren't listed. So again, this is not an exhaustive list, but this is some of the few common ones that we find. And we're also open to questions at the end as well.
Mhm.
Okay, so the stages of grief. So let me preface this by saying that there's lots of theories about grieving and coping out there, and they're all very good, and we can take things from different theories. The theory that as social workers we're taught in school is the 5 stages of grief. So in the late 60s, a Swiss psychiatrist, Elisabeth Kubler-Ross, wrote a book called On Death and Dying, and it was her experience working with terminally ill patients that led her to develop these 5 stages of grief that she found her patients and her patients' families experiencing. And again, while this is one theory, it doesn't mean that you'll experience any of these. And if you do, they don't have to go in order, but it's a really good way of understanding grief. So if you look at the slide, denial. Okay, when something in our life happens, we lose a loved one or have another type of loss, there's the denial. There's, this did not happen. No, I just saw him yesterday. So we have the avoidance. A lot of that comes from confusion. Like how can this happen? Shock, fear. I think fear can cripple us sometimes, especially in hard situations. And that fear keeps us from admitting of what's going on. Anger. Self-explanatory, feeling frustrated, feeling irritable, feeling anxious, bargaining. You're struggling to find the meaning of this. Lord, just bring him back and I will, fill in the blanks. That type of bargaining is something that a lot of us can experience. Depression. So we talk about sadness, feeling hopeless. Again, we can feel avoidance or hostility during depression. Depressive states, remember, again, are very unique to the individual. They don't look the same as everyone else. I think a lot of people feel that depressed people don't get out of bed in the morning, they don't brush their teeth. But depression can look like me today. It could look like someone who can get up in the morning and go to work and be functional and come home and do their thing, and they're just internally having this depressive state. And then I think at some point we go through this acceptance phase, and acceptance doesn't come quickly. It could be years down the road. It's different for everyone. So the acceptance phase is when you're exploring new opportunities, you're moving forward from your loss and developing new life plans or new plans. So again, the 5 stages of grief that Dr. Kubler-Ross talked about, I'm sure we can identify with some of these, but it's a really good way of understanding grief, and it's one of the theories of grief and coping with grief. Okay.
So as Christians, sometimes we don't believe that we are going to experience this grief, and that shouldn't be any further from the truth. Jesus, like the Psalm said, understands that we can be brokenhearted. And just because we are true believers, that does not mean that we won't have loss in our lives. So it's okay to feel that loss. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to take as long as you need to take to grieve and to go through your process, and understand that your faith, your family, your Christian family, your church family, they'll be there for you to help you through their process. And you can always lean on Jesus to help you through.
Okay, so I kind of wanted to throw in some myth versus fact, because these are the things that, you know, as a therapist and as counselors, you know, LaNita and I will run into a lot with our patients. And these are some of the main things that we hear. So here's the myth that we hear a lot. The pain will go away faster if you ignore it, okay? I can tell you right now, ignoring a problem or a loss or is not the answer. You know, ignoring your pain and keeping it from surfacing, it's only going to make it worse, right? What happens with a volcano? The volcano builds and builds and builds and builds and builds, and right, it explodes at some point. You know, when we talk about healing, it's necessary to face your grief, however hard it is, and in dealing with that. And we'll talk about ways that we can cope with our grief. Another myth. Grieving should last about a year. I hear this from a lot of patients who, you know, it's 5-10 years down the road and they're still grieving the loss of their loved one, or the loss of that job that they loved, you know, 3 years ago. There's no specific time range for grieving. It's different from every person. So it's important that when we are grieving a loss, that we're not putting ourselves on a timeline. I know for myself, I'm a very type A personality, and I like planned things, and I like, okay, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. And, you know, whenever I was struggling with the loss, I have to remind myself that I can't plan this, and this is my journey, and giving yourself grace. And another one that a lot of our patients struggle with, again, moving on with your life means forgetting about your loss. Moving on means you've accepted your loss. It doesn't mean that you forget. And a lot of that too, when people have learned to move on, there's a guilt associated with that, which we'll talk about in a minute. You can move on with your life. You can keep your memory for someone or something as an important part of your life. And these memories are more integral to defining the people that we are. So moving on does not mean forgetting. We'll never forget. And we just learn how to incorporate that loss or that person within our new life. Okay.
So when you are dealing with loss and with grief, the most important thing you can do is to acknowledge that you had that loss, that there is a potential grieving process. A lot of people will admit that they have lost something eventually, but they might not admit that it was very, very painful. They kind of shrug off that pain. They don't say, they'll say, I'm getting over it. That's okay. Everything is fine. But you have to acknowledge your pain in an effort to cope with it so you can work your way through the grieving process. We also have to understand that everybody's grief is going to look different. We might have that same loss, like a loss of a loved one, but how I deal with it and how you deal with it and how we grieve through the process is going to be very, very different, even though we might have lost that same person. So it's very important when you're going through this grieving process just to recognize that you are grieving, and then to also understand you still have to take care of yourself. Make sure you eat. Make sure you get some rest. Make sure you're still socializing with those around you and keeping in touch with the loved ones around you that are also grieving with you.
Thank you, LaNita. And you know, I know we've said it probably 6 times already that grief is different and it looks different for everybody, because it's so important to remember that, especially if we're trying to help others through grief, right? So, well, I didn't stay in bed for a week, you know, that doesn't mean that that person is the same as you, or it doesn't mean that you are grieving in a certain way, and you think, well, my mom didn't grieve like that, so there's something wrong with me. So we want to make sure that we just bring it home that everybody is different. Okay, so here are some examples of coping with our grief and loss. Let's talk about it. I think a lot of people don't want to talk about it. Again, there's that myth of if I don't talk about it, it'll go away, right? It's important to share your feelings and the meaning this loss has for you. And again, it can be family or friends, or it can be a professional. You know, sometimes our family and friends are great, but other times we might need to seek out an unbiased person to help us through, and also your pastor or your other church ministers. Participating meaningful rituals and ceremonies. So, example, Christmas tradition. If you had a sweet potato pie on the table for your loved one at Christmas every year, keep doing that. That's important. It's important to help memorize and memorialize that person that you lost. I think keeping those traditions is also a really good way of coping, especially around the holidays. Surround yourself with friends and family who love and support you. Don't isolate yourself. And I think it's important to also say that you might want to put distance and have a boundary with people in your life who aren't the healthiest. They might be toxic people, especially when you're grieving, to maybe put a boundary there and you know, have the ones that love and support you around you at that time. Again, be patient with yourself. You'll have good days, you'll have bad days. On the good days, they might look like every other day before that loss. And then there might be days that you do struggle to get out of bed, or that you are sitting at your desk at work and you start crying. Sometimes they come unexpectedly. Maybe we're not even having a thought, and they can come unexpectedly, excuse me. And sometimes when you think you're finished grieving, the tears may come, and they might come years down the road. Something might trigger a memory of your loved one, and you might have a crying session. That's okay. It happens to all of us. You know, strive to find a way, to find a balanced way of dealing with the demands of daily life. It's okay to say, I'm not doing well today. I'm not going to be able to make that meeting. Or recognizing that maybe the nonstop routine that you had before needs to settle down a little bit until you're feeling better. And it's okay to put that boundary on people. When we talk about, you know, prayer, reflection, connecting with your religious and spiritual convictions in your community. Be sensitive to and flexible with your new needs and changes in your lifestyle. You know, sometimes with a loss, your lifestyle may change. That might be your income or your social life, and, you know, expecting changes in that and just taking time with that. And, you know, I think too, and again, this is not all encompassing of everything that is good in a way of coping, but if coping means sitting down on your couch and watching Netflix, that's okay too. Anything that can relax you, bring you a sense of peace, whatever they might be, book, movies, all of that's okay. We want to make sure that we're staying away from unhealthy coping skills, right? So unhealthy coping skills would be isolating ourselves from everyone. Another unhealthy coping skill is alcohol or drugs, or excessive eating, you know, binge eating. So we want to make sure that we are coping in healthy ways and staying away from those unhealthy coping mechanisms.
In the scheme of what she was saying, you also want to maintain your interest. So if you normally would go to church on Sunday and that loved one isn't there with you, still go. If you were in a sewing club or a book club or line dancing, or any kind of activity that you found enjoyable, you have to maintain those interests. Those things will also be like a support system for you that can help you through that process. And as Alison said, you have to have your boundaries against those negative people in your world. So limit time with people who are telling you that you should be over it. They're not you. They're not going through the grieving process the same way you are. So they aren't allowed to tell you how to go through your grieving process. And those things can actually make you feel worse. So try to limit the time that you spend with those individuals. For a lot of people, writing down your feelings and keeping a journal is another way to express your feelings and to get them out of your system. And as she said, sometimes it might be years later and you remember something or think about something. It's okay to shed a tear every now and again. It's okay. Tears may come and they may go. You might think, hey, it's over, it's done. But when you remember something, you could shed a tear, or you might laugh or smile in remembrance of that person that was there for you. Or in the case of a job loss, you might smile at an incident or that happened at your previous job that was something that was just really enjoyable for you. So, but in this process, just make sure you're thinking about all of those things, but also be very mindful of making major decisions. So you might not want to sell your house in the middle of the grieving process, or change job positions when you're somewhere that's stable and that's providing you the things that you need. So when you're grieving, you're not always in the best mindset. So sometimes major life decisions aren't necessarily things that you need to do at that time. So just be mindful of those around you that are saying things that are hurtful to you, even though they don't mean to be hurtful to you. Because a lot of your friends, they have the best of intentions and they're not attempting to say things that are harmful, but they do. So you might just need to back away from them, or you could just tell them, I didn't really appreciate that. It didn't make me feel wonderful. And they might be accepting of it and they'll be able to be more mindful as well. So just remember that grieving, as we said a lot of times, is going to be specific to you. No one is going to grieve the same way. And you have to take care of yourself and make sure that you're doing things that are going to be helpful and not harmful to you.
All right. So I'm going to show this really quick 2-minute clip by Dr. Robert Niemeyer. We're lucky to have him at the University of Memphis. He is a world-renowned expert on grief. And I'd like to share a couple of theories when it comes to grief with you all, and some good coping skills. And so he talks about the 3 R's of processing grief. So I wanted to show this clip really quick because I think it's really helpful. I'm gonna play and hopefully you all can hear it.
Turn the volume up.
Of course, a grieving person, as all of us lose many people.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did not go as planned.
Hi, my name is Bob Niemeyer. I'm a grief therapist and, of course, a grieving person, as all of us lose many people, many places, and many possessions across the course of our lives. In my work with myself and also with my clients, I've learned 3 R processes that help us as we try to negotiate the land of loss. The first of these is the importance of retelling the story of what has happened to us, the story of the loss of our loved one, the loss of the life we once had, and to continue retelling that story until it changes, not to simply repetitively retell it, but to look for the new openings, the new chapters, the new possibilities in that story that includes the loss, but also extends beyond it. The second feature that I'd like to emphasize is the importance of rebuilding our bond with our loved one rather than relinquishing it. Grieving isn't a process of letting go. It's a process of finding a new way to hold on, to somehow conserve that connection of love with our loved one, and to move forward not without them, but to move forward with our loved one in our lives. The third and final is that the challenge of grief is in some way to reinvent our lives and reinvent ourselves in the context of our lives. We are never the same again after we lose someone who is close to our hearts, a big part of our lives. And for this reason, we need to change. Our lives need to change to embrace that as an opportunity that includes both sadness and hope is the challenge of bereavement. Best of success to you in all three.
Okay. So I love how Dr. Niemeyer talks about the 3 R's. Again, retelling, rebuilding, and reinventing. So through the 3 R's, we're not forgetting our loved one or our loss. We're just, again, rebuilding and reinventing ourselves within the context of our life as it is now. So Dr. Robert Niemeyer has a ton of books and a ton of journal articles that, and he also has a website too, if you just Google his name, and you can bring up lots of different articles and whatnot about grief. But he is, you know, definitely the go-to, especially in the Mid-South and then beyond. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about guilt. I specifically wanted to talk about guilt because in working with patients throughout the years, guilt tends to be a theme with a lot of people who are grieving. I call it the shoulda, woulda, couldas. I should have done this. I would have, if I would have done this, or I could have done this. So I think it's important just to talk briefly about guilt in the context of grief and loss.
Okay, so guilt is very, very a complex emotion. You don't know, there's just so many things to say about guilt. You're thinking, hey, what if I had done this? What if I had done that? And we are going, there's not anything that the shoulda, coulda, wouldas are not going to be helpful to you in the grieving process. They happen. You think about these things, but in the end, you can't go back and change what has already been and what has already happened. And in most cases, it's usually not your fault. So there wasn't anything you shoulda, coulda, or would have done that would have made a difference in what happened. So we have to fight through those guilty feelings and try to get some clarity on it. But it's okay that you have this guilt. You just have to recognize it and come to terms with it.
And just to reiterate what LaNita said, you know, sometimes we know it's not based in reality. We know we didn't do anything or couldn't have prevented this, but sometimes those negative thoughts do tend to creep in. So what's important about guilt? Okay, guilt is a feeling, and it's a feeling that whether it's grief or loss or whatever other situation, we all experience guilt at some point. So again, it's a natural feeling that we have. Feelings need to be validated. We need to find ways to accept and integrate and move forward with these feelings. Again, giving yourself grace, saying when you're having this thought, this guilty thought, that you're giving yourself grace and understanding that it's a natural feeling, and we're going to move forward with it. We can't stop feeling guilty because someone else tells us to. If it were that easy, right? LaNita and I wouldn't have jobs, right? So if someone said, well, you're not guilty, you didn't do anything wrong, you're not guilty, right, that's not helpful. So it's important to reflect on the response, the reasons for our guilt, and then consider ways we can cope with that feeling of guilt. First and foremost, accepting guilt as a common and normal feeling in the grief process.
So how do you help those that are grieving? How do you help friends and families that are around you that have experienced a loss? Well, the first thing is just to be there. Call them, check in on them, eat with them, make sure that they're being social if you were already social with them. Just being available and being there. And when you are with them, listen. Don't try to tell them how to grieve or what they should be doing, but just listen and let them tell you how they are feeling. Let them tell you what's going on with them. And don't make any judgments about what it is that they are feeling and what they are going through. Everybody's going to do this differently. Everybody is going to grieve in a different manner. And what you think is right is not necessarily right for them. So just sit, communicate with them, let them talk, let them express their feelings, and don't make any judgments about how you would do this differently. That is not going to be of help to them, even though we all have that in us to say, well, if you just do this, then this will happen. But that is not always the case for those that are grieving around you. You're going to have to be very patient with those that are grieving. Grief can take 2 months, it can take 10 years. So you have to be patient with those around you that are grieving and understand that they'll have good days and bad days, and those days can last more than just a year or 2 days or a week or whatever you feel the grieving process should be. It can take longer for the person around you. Be sensitive to them and understanding, and encourage them to continue to take care of themselves. If they were exercising regularly, encourage them to do that. If they were a Netflix and chill type of person, encourage them to do that. If you all were together in groups and organizations, make sure you're checking in and encouraging them to continue on with those things. And in the end, you also have to understand that you do have limitations. That's why Alison and I are here and other professionals are here, because we all do have limitations, and sometimes professional help or assistance is needed. And that's where Living Well Network comes in. We are an organization that's going to be there to help and assist when a little bit more is needed.
Okay, so that's the end of our grief talk for the moment. And just a real quick information about what we do at the Living Well Network. We are a philanthropy-based program within the Methodist system. We were founded by the widow of the former chief information officer at FedEx. His name was Dennis H. Jones. He was with FedEx for decades and struggled with depression for about 10 years. His family had no idea the intensity of his depression until he died by suicide right after Christmas about 11 years ago. And so his family wanted to help those who were struggling in silence. And so this is where we were born. And so what do? We connect people to behavioral health resources through assessment, referral, and follow-up services. We educate the public about behavioral health through presentations and speaking engagements throughout the community. We also advocate for more communication, access, and resources for behavioral health. We're actively involved with many community organizations, including the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network, that we, again, grassroots efforts in trying to improve access to needed behavioral health services within our communities. And so,
how do you reach us? Like she said, Living Well Network is a philanthropy organization. We're available Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. A behavioral health screener such as myself will answer the phone, will ask what your concerns are, and then we'll try to pair you with an appropriate behavioral health counselor. That could be a counselor, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, support groups. If you need drug and alcohol services, we can pair you with those things. If you need to be admitted into a hospital for mental health, we can help you with that as well. We are open to the public, so anyone can call. It is not something that is based on what kind of insurance you have or anything of that nature. We are here to help to try to pair you with someone out there. You can give us a call at the number on the screen. It's 901-762-8558.
And all of our services are free. All of our assessment and referral are free. Our community programming and presentations and whatnot, they're all free. This is part of what we do to increase awareness within our community. So we also have a website that I'm very, very proud of. We received a grant about 5 years ago from Cigna to be able to jazz up our website, and we are very proud of it. So this is our homepage, and we have various articles. We have self-administered depression screenings or anxiety screenings that you can take. And we also have resources on that as well. You can also reach out to us via our website. At the link down, it says email us, and there's a little box that you fill out, and then that will get sent to us, and then we will go from there. Our website is www.thelivingwellnetwork.org. You can also go on the Methodist site, but there's lots of clicks to get to this one. But www.thelivingwellnetwork.org. Where can you turn for help? So of course, us at the Living Well Network, that's our main number. The Memphis Crisis Center is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if you need immediate assistance, you can call 988 or 911. So let me talk about 988 for a second. 988 is years in the making. So now it is national. So if you're having a behavioral health emergency, you can call 988, and that connects you with the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It is an incredible thing that has happened. This 3-digit number is just, it's something that as advocates, we really, really, really are excited about. So again, if you are having a mental health emergency, 988 is the only thing you have to call, and then you're dispatched to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. We also have in Tennessee, we have a crisis text line, which increased tremendously during the pandemic, as you can imagine. And we actually have in Tennessee more people reaching out via the text line as opposed to crisis lines. So that is, all you have to do is text 741741. Feel free to give out this information to any friends or family or community members. All right. And this is our contact information, our email, our phone number. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or need assistance, and we'll be glad to help you. And if you have any questions, we're open for questions. So if you all have questions, if you don't, then Pastor Smith will close this out.
Thank you so much, Alison. Maybe we could put the three of us on the screen. If you would, please, we've got a few moments. If you would use your chat, y'all let me know if you hear any feedback. But if you could use your chat on your computer while we put all of us on the screen so that we can have a little dialogue here for the next few moments, please do so. Or if you have any questions and you are not as computer literate as some others, jot your question down. You can text us or email us, and we'll make sure that we connect you with Alison and LaNita and get a response back to you. This is a very good network and a very good time of sharing, and they said a lot of very important things. I failed to mention this, that I received a handout from LaNita and Alison as well that we will be giving out on tomorrow. It is a hold on a second here. It is a self-help. It's a quick review of a lot of things that they cover today. And so we're going to have that handout available to all members, visitors, and friends that will be in worship tomorrow. I would like to suggest, before we get into the brief discussion, LaNita and Alison, that at the end of your presentation, put a big cross, because now I know this is a social presentation, so please forgive me. But you know, at the root of it all, and y'all said something very encouraging earlier, don't stop your activity. And, you know, don't stop coming to Bible fellowship, Bible study. If you play golf, if you play volleyball, if you do this, if you do that, if you walk with friends, don't stop those things. And I want to share with Rosemark and the friends that are here today, especially with your spiritual relationship being the nucleus of what makes everything come together. Don't stop that fellowship with your friends from a biblical perspective, your church. The Christ-centered fellowship is very important in keeping you connected. That's very important. I want to ask a question, Alison and LaNita, about staying busy. I know for myself, I think that, you know, I've been kind of busy. Now school is about to start. You know, you move from one thing to another and you find yourself just settling down, and you started thinking about, okay, my dad now is synonymous with people saying he's dead. You know, so that terminology resonates with you because you never had to make that a synonymous phrase. You know, so you keep staying busy. Is there a problem with staying busy? Because I saw in your presentation, keep doing what you're doing. Of course, you deal with grief in your own way. I mean, I don't want to be, you know, sitting looking at the wall, looking at paint. You know, I want to stay busy. Maybe that was a bad analogy, but what is the threat? What is the issue with staying busy and never really addressing things?
So I think, and great question. And let me explain. Keeping a routine and staying busy, I think, are two different things in this context. So we want to keep up our routines as much as we can. So if it's Taco Tuesday, we try to get Taco Tuesday in. If it's work, if it's you know, a Bible study or whatever, that as much as we can, physically and emotionally, that we try to keep up that routine. The problem with when we say, we don't want to say just keep busy, that kind of has a little hint of keep busy and you'll forget about it, which we don't want to happen, right? So we want to keep up our routines as best we can, but don't keep busy with new things just because you don't want to feel your feelings, right? Just because you don't want to deal with that grief. So I think, again, there's a slight difference in that. We want to keep busy with our normal routines that we've had as best that we can.
Yeah, I got it. If you have a question, please, there is a hand raise in your little reaction box. You can just click that hand raise and then we'll recognize you. Do we have any questions on the floor? Can the state of our society, here's a question here, can the state of our society play in people's mental state?
Absolutely. That might be a whole nother presentation. But, you know, look at the times that we're living in, and I know every generation can probably say that, but there's so much turmoil going on, and you know, we're human. And, you know, if you look at the pandemic, this was a collective experience. I think one of the very few collective experiences that everyone experienced at the same time. That, of course, plays on, you know, our overall functioning. It's hard to get on the news or social media and not see just the the bad things that are going on. So yes, it does play a central role in our thoughts and our feelings, but it's what we do with those thoughts and feelings of what's important. You know, I did a lot of presentations during the pandemic, and I would encourage people, you know, sometimes news is too much. And so we need to take a break from it. So, you know, start following funny cat memes on Facebook or Instagram, and sort of limit yourself to how much news you're getting on a daily basis. I think that we can become very enthralled with all the news that's going on in today's world, and it can make us sad. It can make us feel hopeless at times. So it's really good to have a boundary and step away from news sources, whether that's TV or social media or whatnot. So yes, the answer is definitely yes.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? If you would, if you can't find that button, just begin to speak. It's in your reaction. If you click that reaction and it says raise hand on your phone, or you can begin to speak. We have a few more minutes here.
And just to say this, Pastor Smith, you know, it was a very condensed presentation. I don't like to overwhelm people with presentations, as you know, about grief or whatnot. I'm giving everyone just sort of, LaNita and I just really wanted to do something, you know, basic, kind of an understanding, because sometimes we experience things and we don't understand it. So it was important to understand what grief is, what our emotions are. You're not the only one that feels this way. So if you're experiencing grief and you need to, if you feel like it is something that you need to talk to a professional with, you know, definitely reach out to us and we can connect you.
Okay, I have another question here. How can a person detox their mind?
Well, I like to call it, how do we cope? Maybe. We don't want to, you know, I think when it comes to how can we clear our mind, I think, again, sometimes in times of crisis, we get a good sense of who in our life loves us and who cares for us, right? I think when we're grieving and when we're struggling, the ones who stand up and are there are the ones that, you know, we want to have in our lives. I think in times of crisis, we definitely see those who aren't as caring, or those that are not in it for, you know, the friendship or the love. And so we want to definitely, as much as we can, have a boundary with toxicity in our life. That might be people, it might include family, but boundaries are important. Again, removing ourselves from social media, those types of things. I always go back to social media because it's such an important, I mean, it's in our lives, it's in our children's lives, it's in our families' lives. And I think sometimes it can be very toxic. So we want to make sure that when we talk about detoxing our mind, right, that maybe we stay away from all that negativity. We stay away from the negativity and add more positive things in our life, such as church, Bible study, doing those hobbies that made us smile. So again, boundaries are important when it comes to wanting to clear our mind from all the negativity.
Okay, that was a good question. I was about to ask something else and ask LaNita, how does she detox? But I got 3 more questions here. LaNita, we'll get to that later. What are some signs? Let me get to the other question here. Okay, what are signs that your grieving has gone too far?
You want to answer that, LaNita?
I can take that one. Your grieving is going too far when it's affecting your life in a negative way, and you aren't able to function or do the things that you should be able to do. Not just the things that you want to do, but the things you should be able to do. Like You should be able at some point to go back to work and resume some of your normal activities. When you aren't able to do that, then you might need to seek some professional help so you can work through whatever it is that's holding you back during your grieving process.
Okay, that's a good question. That's something that you rarely hear asked. You know, when we talk about how to grieve, but never the question of when it's gone too far. And you're saying when it affects your activity that puts you back in some sense of new norm, the things that you should be doing. That's an important question. Here's another question on the chat. Is it normal, or could you become desensitized to death because it has happened so frequently?
The answer is yes. I think that that's a very, I think especially in the past couple of years when we've experienced this pandemic, and, a lot of families lost several loved ones, not just one or two. And I think that you do become desensitized to it. So because sometimes it's back to back, and you're grieving one person and somebody else happens to pass away. So absolutely, I think you can become desensitized to it. I don't necessarily think that that's necessarily a bad thing, because I do think that you're still grieving. You might be desensitized to something, but it doesn't mean that you don't feel it. It doesn't. You just have a different way of responding to it because it happens so frequently. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It becomes a bad thing when you're so desensitized that you're not even just dealing with it. You're just, saying, okay, well, let's move on. I think that's certainly unhealthy. But, sometimes it can happen. Something can happen so frequently that our response is different.
Yeah. These are some good questions. Here's another good question. Can guilt cause us to harm ourselves in other ways other than physical abuse?
Absolutely. And a lot of times it's more of a mental abuse in places than it is a physical abuse. So you can start to feel guilty, and then you start saying to yourself that I'm a bad person, or you just have a negative self-talk. And that negative self-talk can lead to other mental health issues, depression, anxiety. It could even potentially lead to like a suicidal conversation. So yes, it can start off with a mental and then lead to a physical. So guilt is something that you do need to address and try to recognize when you start feeling.
Okay, these are good questions. Here's the final question. How can an individual find where they are in the grieving process? How do you know where you are? I know you pointed out those, what was it, 5 steps?
Mm-hmm. So,
I think.
Great question. And so let me reiterate that that model of grieving process is one of the many models, and it's not necessarily something that we follow, that all of us follow. Okay, so when we talk about grieving process, gosh, I mean, that's so, again, it's so unique to everyone. So you could have a depression first, right? The depressive state first, and then anger could come absolutely later. So it just depends. I know it's not going to be a straightforward answer. It just depends on, where you're at the moment when it comes to grieving process. And so again, it's so individualized that I don't want to say you're on the 3rd step right now. Do you know what I mean? We don't want to say that because again, every process is very different. And it's just important to, again, recognize where you're at and again, moving forward, and again, seeking out professional help if you feel that you're stuck in a phase of grief.
Wow, these are great questions. Thank you all so much. We're going to send the link out for replaying for our membership, where they can look at it again and they can also share. Thank you all so much for attending this virtual space. The continued sessions will be live. They'll be live here, and we're going to have other guests and other therapists and Christian counselors to come as we physically and actually pray for individuals as they seek not just professional strategies, but it's undergirded by those biblical principles of faith to help us on this new journey in life, coping with grief and the transition of a loved one. Thank you, Alison White. Thank you, LaNita Conley, for taking out your Saturday. I know it's a holiday weekend. Some of you may be traveling. Some of you may be in transit right now, but we really appreciate both of you coming. LaNita and Alison, any other closing comments?
I just wanted to reiterate the Living Well Network. You did mention having biblical undergirdment and Christian counseling. We can also find you those counselors if you are limited in what you have available at the church itself. We do reach out and try to pair you with Christian counselors and ministries as well.
Alison?
Wow, exactly what LaNita said. And again, we're here if you need additional assistance. And just thank you for letting us come. And thank you to, Pastor Smith, who is, it's so important that we talk about behavioral health. I think that, we're learning more and more as time goes on and how important it is. And that, and as Christians, that we experience mental health issues just like everyone else, and that we're getting support from our church and our pastors. And so, Pastor Smith, just thank you for bringing this subject to light and giving it time.
Thank you so much.
What you do.
Thank you all for joining us. Remember, it's a seat in the circle. We invite you to the circle. We're going to continue to pray for you. We'll see you on tomorrow at Men's Fellowship 8:45, and then our worship celebration will begin at 10 o'clock. Invite a friend. We'll continue our prayer and thrusting into worship on tomorrow morning. Thank you so much. Y'all enjoy the rest of your day, a day of fun-filled day of peace and enjoying the surroundings and love of family, friends, and loved ones. God bless you, and we'll see you on tomorrow. Have a beautiful Saturday. Thank you.